No, and so the degrowth model is predicated on the idea that, well, let's lay out the ideas that really there are too many people on the planet, and the people who are there now, especially the rich ones, are consuming far too many resources per capita. And so the only way forward to a sustainable planet is through degrowth. Okay, so let's take that apart. First of all, who's going to impose that degrowth? Like, can you imagine the totalitarian state that would have to be built in order for every single one of your purchases to be monitored, which is really what the plan is in some real sense? I mean, that's just a terrible, nightmarish vision of petty tyranny everywhere, where every single move you make is analyzed in terms of its overall planetary consequence, and only calculated by people who do not have your best interests in mind, by the way. But worse than that is that there isn't any evidence whatsoever that if you use this strategy of degrowth and you make people poor, that you're going to get anything approximating the beneficial effect that you propose. I mean, let's look at how this is already playing out. So what has Germany managed with an approximate degrowth strategy? I mean, so part of the degrowth is, well, we certainly don't need fossil fuels or nuclear on the energy front. Okay, so from what I've been able to gather now, energy is about 5 times more expensive per unit cost in Germany than it is in the United States. A huge number of industrial endeavors are fleeing Germany for US, which isn't so bad, or China, which is really not good, because it's too expensive even to do such things as build batteries for electric cars in Germany now. But also, you might say, well, that's all worth it because now we have all these renewables and the place is much cleaner, and if we have to pay a price in terms of loss of industrial productivity, c'est la vie. But I read the other day too, and I hope this is accurate, that Germany has fallen to something underneath the 100th position in the world in terms of emissions per unit of energy produced, because as we've moved foolishly and precipitously towards unreliable renewals, especially on the wind and solar front, the Germans have had to, especially because they killed their nuclear plants, they've had to turn back to coal. And so now they're burning way more coal than they used to for 5 times the electricity price and unreliable power to boot. And so this degrowth philosophy, which violates the presuppositions of economic motivation, let's say on a psychological and economic front, is not only going to demolish the industrial structure, make the poor much poorer and more desperate, but it's going to bring about worsening of the conditions for environmental sustainability, and very, very rapidly. Now, we're also seeing in Europe, and you can comment on this a bit, is that because we're now in an energy crisis, a foolish energy crisis, that people are starting to deforest Europe and they're starting to burn peat in Ireland again because they have to heat their damn homes. So even by the standards of the environmentalists themselves, perverse though those standards may be, the degrowth philosophy is completely unsustainable politically and psychologically. Because you're just not going to tell people, you can let grandma freeze in the dark.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that it's not going to happen. People are just not going to allow that, and they won't accept that sort of tyranny as you're talking about. You would need much, much more than anyone would be willing to offer up. Just to give you one sense of it, for the average American, some estimates indicate that going net zero would actually cost you in the order of $12,000 per person per year by 2050. That's just impossible to imagine that anyone would ever accept. And also, I think we need to separate. There's been this tendency in almost all conversation to totally muddle climate and environment. Now, environment is a lot of other things, and it's, for instance, air pollution and all these other things that are fairly, local to you. So degrowth would actually solve climate change because we would stop producing. It wouldn't solve a lot of the other environmental problems, because now we would start, burning everything else, and we would be terribly poor, and life would be horrible in so many other ways. I think fundamentally we just need to get back to realizing that when you're saying, and these protesters will glue themselves to the roads and say, we don't want you to use any fossil fuels. But of course, when they come back in their lives, they're crucially dependent mostly on lots and lots of energy produced by fossil fuels. And they would probably, most of them, not be willing to give that up. And if they're not even willing to do that, of course they're not going to get anyone else to do that just by gluing themselves on highways. What they're going to do is if they could come up with a new innovation that was cleaner than anything else, if they, instead of gluing themselves to the road, would actually take up university, go and figure out, and it need not be a solution to climate change, but one of those solutions, but one that was actually effective, then of course they would have done real good in the world. And so again, I think that's the sort of purpose of our whole conversation, to say, stop believing this is the end of the world, because it's not. But also stop believing that the solution to the end of the world is to glue yourself, or to just be gloomy, or tell everyone we should just stop with everything. The solution is smart technologies.